American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tellustrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast brought to you by Coach Paint. I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by my co-host Robert Parker. Today is May 25th, 2021. We'll dive into the key matchups that will define the 2021 ACC football season. And just like the Big Ten episode we did previously, we're not talking about necessarily the games that are going to define the conference champion, but just critical games for programs within the SEC and then also in the championship race. But we're going to look at it like holistically throughout the whole conference. We want to be able to talk about everybody. So Rob, we're going to dive in. The first game of the season for the ACC will be on Thursday night. Jeff Scott and the USF Bulls will travel up to Raleigh, North Carolina, and take on NC State. I really like this matchup because I think it's going to be a test for both of these programs. USF had a terrible season on paper last year. On paper, this looks like it should be a blowout, but I think they're going to be a dark horse. There you got a week 2 matchup against the Gators, and they went out swinging last year at the end of the season, the Bulls. They played a tight game with the Memphis Tigers. They were kept it interesting with UCF. UCF outpaced them, but they were scoring. And if they can continue that on offense when they suit up in game 1 here, NC State might have a little bit of trouble on their hands on a Thursday night if they're a little sloppy.
Yeah, I know you're a big advocate of Jeff Scott, Nick. So I think he really has this program going in the right direction. And just like you said, I really haven't seen too much from this NC State program the last couple of years. You just think, with North Carolina just, transcending as a football program under Mac Brown, you would just think, North Carolina State would try to compete and try to keep there. But it really seems like they're going in the opposite direction. So if USF comes out and wins this game on Thursday night, I wouldn't be, surprised at all. I think this is an evenly matched game going into the year, depending on, with injuries and how the rosters shake up. But I can really see USF pulling this one off. I don't know so much about the week 2 matchup that they have going into the Swamp, though. So that's
story. Gators are coming down to Tampa.
Gators going to the Tampa. Yep.
Raymond James. Yeah, Florida's going down to Raymond James in week 2. So USF likely to start the season 0-2. I'm sure they'll be underdogs in that NC State game, but don't sleep on that NC State. You better be ready to play from game 1. Friday night, September 3rd, the Tar Heels, Mac Brown goes into Blacksburg to face Virginia Tech. What an opener for Sam Howell. I mean, first off, as college football fans, nice to know we're going to be able to watch Sam Howell play on Friday night. Early look at a guy who, preseason projection, he's definitely in the Heisman race, definitely in that talk for the number 1 draft pick. So get an early look at Sam Howell against a Hokie defense that could be tough. They lost a few guys off that defense last year, but really looking for a bounce back season in general in Blacksburg.
Yeah, this is definitely a firework game coming out the gate for Sam Howell and the North Carolina Tar Heels. Just like you said, he's definitely up there preseason, top quarterback to be drafted. He's getting the Heisman Trophy consideration and everything. But he's lost a lot of weapons to the NFL this past year. Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, those two stud running backs, Diami Brown on the outside. Chad's even Daz Newsome, the other receiver on the other side, he lost as well. So it's going to be a lot of movable pieces on that offense, and it's going to be up to Sam Howell to kind of galvanize the troops and kind of get that win week 1 in Blacksboro. That's a tough environment to play in. We know the COVID regulations is probably going to be, if not at 100% capacity with these stadiums, but they're going to be, close to 100% capacity. So that's definitely a fiery atmosphere to come in and play in week 1. But, I really think Sam Howell is definitely my QB1 coming out of this year. And I really think he's going to have a great season. And he's just going to replicate what he did last year, even with the pieces that moved on to the NFL. So
yeah, I think that's a good point about the pieces that moved on, Rob, because I think North Carolina is one of those teams. I think everybody wants to love North Carolina. Mac Brown's awesome. The uniforms are great. It's a school that I think most people look at it and go, why aren't they better at football most years? But they finally got some good teams. They got a great quarterback up front in front of their program. I'm worried that this year might be a slight step back from last year, though. And we saw some red flags at times last year, even with all that talent. Like, what was that performance when they went down to Florida State last year? That was brutal. They had some off games last year. They weren't on all the time. And so, like, the consistency's got to be there. Virginia Tech Virginia Tech hasn't been that elite top 15 program in a few years. So really, if you're looking at this game, I know it's a tough matchup out the gate for North Carolina, but if Carolina's going to live up to the hype that you're talking about, you're going to have to get the job done in Blacksburg in week 1. So that could be a tough chore. Let's go on to Saturday, Rob. A lot of G5 matchups, but the ACC, they really end the weekend with a few doozies here. Alabama and Miami square off in Atlanta. Not going to waste a ton of time talking about that game because I'm not sure how much of a game that's going to be. If I'm Miami, I'm benching De'Aaron King, by the way. Don't let him play in that game. Let him get rested up for the ACC race. I know we talked about that. Georgia and Clemson, though, Saturday night in Charlotte, another neutral site game. I hate neutral site games outside unless it's bowl season or a conference title. Like, I can't stand neutral site games. However, if it gets us schools like Georgia and Clemson together more often, I won't complain too much. That's a heck of a matchup. And DJ Uyunglele out of the gate gets a severe test with that Georgia defense, Rob.
Yeah, he does. But I really think he's up for the challenge. I really don't have so much to say about Clemson. They're kind of like the Alabama of the world. Like, they don't rebuild, they reload. I'm really going to be looking at what Georgia does out the gate. JT Daniels, it seems like he's going to be the clear-cut starter, going into game 1, day 1. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder, with all the quarterback, conundrums that we see out of Georgia with Kirby Smart. But I tell you what, George Pickens is lost for the season. That torn ACL that he suffered, during the offseason, that's going to be one of those playmakers that JT Daniels was going to rely on throughout the season, and he's not there. I know they have the stud 5-star tight end, in Washington, and they have some other pieces that they recruited. But
how'd they use him last year?
That they used him not like a Kyle Pitts, how Florida used Kyle Pitts, but I think he gets involved in the offense a little bit more this year, especially with George Pickens not there for the remainder of the season because of the ACL injury. But this one's going to be a slobber knocker slugfest. A week 1 matchup that everyone's going to be dialed into. I think ultimately Clemson comes out on top because I just really think, those pieces on the outside, Georgia they recruit so well, but for some reason they haven't been able to recruit those skill position guys on the outside the last couple of years. It's all kind of been the defense, the running back you. So I really like Clemson to kind of win this one, but this one's a big pivotal matchup.
Clemson, though, replacing a lot of pieces on offense. You see Cornell Powell's gone, Travis Etienne, obviously Lawrence we mentioned, but I mean, again, like Clemson just kind of reloads at this point. So you have confidence that they're going to figure it out. They're getting some players back from injury too. And that defense,
Justin Ross.
If
Justin Ross can come back,
But that defense, Rob.
Yep.
Is every starter returning? If it's not, it's about 10.
It's close to every starter returning on that Clemson defense.
Yeah, so it's gonna. It might be a disappointing night for the quarterbacks in that one, but it'll be fun. Hopefully, fun to watch. And you're right, George Pickens. That's gonna be a big loss for JT Daniels. It would have been nice to have him downfield. All right, let's go on to Sunday, September 5th. Notre Dame goes down to Tallahassee to play Florida State, and you know how I feel. Notre Dame's not been my favorite team the last few years. It'll be interesting to see what direction they go after losing nearly their entire offensive line to the NFL and Ian Book. Who might get some playing time down in New Orleans if things don't go great with Jameis down there. So we'll see how that goes. But a lot of talent turnover in South Bend this year. A lot of addition in talent in Tallahassee, though. And to me, Florida State, not just because we're Florida guys, we watch Florida State anyway, but like they're an interesting program. You got Mackenzie Milton coming in. So you're going to have competent quarterback. Yeah, I know he's coming off a devastating leg injury, but we saw Alex Smith come in and play some competent football for Washington last year. I think Mackenzie Milton could be a huge impact in Tallahassee. And I mean, this is a winnable game for Florida State, Rob. I'm going to say it. Like, I'm not totally optimistic in it, but I think it's absolutely this is not Notre Dame's a playoff team and Florida State's not good. These are two totally different teams right now.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Nick. I mean, if you ask me, I think Florida State has enough talent to win this game. But with Mike Norvell as the head coach and, all the turnover that Florida State has had, especially last year, it was kind of like the coaches going against the players and vice versa. So it kind of seems like that has kind of, filtered itself out. But once again, Notre Dame, they come in year out and, they're highly ranked and, but they have talent and they just been consistent year in, year out. I think Notre Dame wins this one, coming out the gate. I know they're replacing a lot of people on that offensive line. I know they're replacing Ian Book, who, if I can recall, I think he's the all-time winningest quarterback at Notre Dame. So that's a lot to kind of replace. But I think Notre Dame has, Jack Cohn actually, the Wisconsin transfer coming. So he's played a lot of, football, a lot of big games. So I think he'll be able to ride the ship and galvanize the troops in week one and kind of, come out with the win on top against Florida State, who's trying to get back to, the Florida State of old. So I give the edge.
Long way to go for that. I'm not thinking Florida State, but would it be crazy if Florida State went, I don't know, 9-3 this year? Like, is that out of the question? I mean, that wouldn't totally stun me if they could turn it around that quick with some of the guys they brought in. But hey, let's go to on Labor Day evening, another matchup in Atlanta. Louisville plays Ole Miss. The Lane Train gets a shot at the Cards. Hey, look, Scott Satterfield interviewed for that South Carolina job this year and this offseason. Didn't make a lot of people in Louisville very happy. That's kind of a rough situation right now. But if they come out and they beat Ole Miss out the gate, I think that could really set the tone for the season. And Louisville is one of those teams, Rob. The ACC, we know who the top dog is with Clemson. But there are a lot of teams, the ability to shake up from about 2 to 8 in the depth chart in the ACC this year is fascinating. Like, there are a lot of teams in that middle ground. Like, Louisville could be at the bottom of the league, or they could be a surprise team like challenging Clemson. I don't know what the ACC is yet this year. I don't have a good feel for it. And I think someone like Malik Cunningham is fascinating to me. And this Louisville team, I mean, there'd probably be 100 points scored in this Ole Miss game right off the bat. I love this game as a Labor Day night game because I think there's going to be a ton of offense. But Matt Corral and Malik Cunningham, definitely a great quarterback battle to get us going on Labor Day night.
Huge quarterback battle. And I tell you what, those guys can actually be battling for the Heisman Trophy at the end of the year. Just like you said, Nick, Louisville can be one of those teams. They can be really, really bad, or they can be really, really good. And it all rests on the shoulders of Malik Cunningham. And I know Tutu Atwell, he's went on to the NFL, and that's a huge weapon to replace. But you've seen, Malik Cunningham actually go out and win games. But just like you said, you've also seen him go out and kind of lose games because, he's, taking those risk throws and, tucking the ball and running and not being careful, holding on to the ball and,
Gotta get
just
that defense going.
having those bad turnovers. But I tell you what, this is definitely going to be an offensive matchup coming out the gate with Matt Corral and Malik Cunningham. I give the edge to Ole Miss because I just really think Lane Kiffin is moving in the right direction. He has that program moving in the right direction. And Louisville has to prove something. And if they can come out with the win against Ole Miss, I think, they're going to end up being in a high, bowl game at the end of the year, because that's going to be a tough matchup on that Labor Day night.
That'd be a tough one to lose if you're Lane Kiffin. That'd be a tough one to lose. Yep. But Satterfield, if Louisville pulls that off, that's a very nice way to start the season for the Cards. Hey, let's go to the next Saturday, September 11th here, the second week of the season. NC State goes to Mississippi State. Big game for Leach and the Bulldogs. But like we said, with NC State, this program has just been a middling program for a long time, and we're not really expecting it to go either much of any way right now. But I really think this program needs a win like this on the road. If they could survive that USF opener, they go into Starkville and beat Mississippi State, and you start off 2-0 that way. That's a very nice start of the season for NC State. However, I think Mississippi State is going to be overlooked massively in the preseason. I think this roster is going to turned over a whole bunch last off from where it was at the beginning of 2020. And Mike Leach, his teams tend to struggle the first few years in wherever he is. I mean, we saw that Washington State, Texas Tech. First couple of years are never great, but it's because he really doesn't care about how he impacts the people there right away. He wants to get his guys in. He wants to run it his way. And it doesn't always go well when you're the new guy in town. And so you need a couple years to build that culture if you're Mike Leach. So for that reason, I also don't have huge expectations for Mississippi State. But if they win their non-conference schedules and sneak out a couple of game wins in the SEC, they go 2-7 in the SEC, 2-6 in the SEC. That's a bowl season right there. So this game for Mississippi State is huge, Rob.
Yeah, it really is. And I tell you what, not to show my SEC bias, but I really give the edge to Mississippi State in this game. You know what Mike Leach likes to do. He likes to, throw it out. He likes the air raid system. We saw that upset with LSU last year in a COVID year. And I think, you give Mike Leach a year under his belt. You give him, more time with the players and more time where they can develop within the system. And I think you put that out on the field, and I think you're going to get a good result in that. And I really, at this point, with NC State and their program, I just don't think they've been recruiting the athletes that can kind of compete with that particular style of play. So it could be really a long night for the NC State Wolfpack if Mike Leach and Mississippi State can keep rolling like they did last year, especially in that LSU game.
Those Cowboys, those cowbells are something else too. If you don't have a lot of experience with that, they could be something else on a Saturday night. All right, let's go. Knoxville, Tennessee, another ACC SEC matchup. Pitt goes down to Tennessee to play Josh Heupel and the Tennessee Volunteers. Pitt lost a lot of players off their defense last year, but they had one critical returnee, Kenny Pickett, at quarterback. So they're going to have a ton of experience there at quarterback this year. I mean, I don't know if that's a make or break thing, but this Tennessee team probably would have lost to Pitt last year. So it's a chance for Heupel to make an early statement and win a coin toss game. I look at this as a 50-50 game. And right now, Rob, I'm giving the edge to Pitt. I think this Tennessee team's got a long way to go to recover. But if you're Pitt, you could go down to Knoxville and steal one.
Yeah, you really can. And I tell you what, you have a first-year head coach coming into Knoxville and Josh Heupel. You have a lot of transfer, especially, through the transfer portal. We've seen, a linebacker. We've seen running backs. Actually, Eric Gray, I think he ended up in Oklahoma. Yep. So it's a lot of turnover on that roster, not only for the NFL picks that got drafted and the undrafted picks, but also the people that, left through the transfer portal. So just like you said, Nick, this is a coin flip game to me. And this is a game where Kenny Pickett could win, being in the right situations, running the right schemes, and just having that experience at the quarterback position with Pitt. So at this point in time, I give the edge to Pitt. But it wouldn't surprise me if Tennessee was to win this game. But this is a game that, playing in the ACC, if you're the Pittsburgh Panthers, you want to win this game on the road to show that the ACC is for real. And if Josh Heupel loses this game, it won't be the worst game for him to lose.
But not a good luck for Narduzzi to lose this game, though.
Yep,
if Pitt goes down there and loses this game. So, I mean, this is a statement game for both programs, really.
Yep.
Hey, Rob, you also got Appalachian State going to Miami to cap off September 11th. Let's go down to the following week here. UCF at Louisville. We talked about Louisville already, but this is just a very intriguing matchup on a Friday night. UCF loves those opportunities they get to play the ACC schools. I swear, like the last 5 years, it feels like UCF between 2020 and just like either a hurricane or something, they have something weird where their ACC games end up getting canceled. So hopefully they'll actually get to play one of these days. But UCF also opens the season with Boise. I know we're not talking about that right now, but UCF and Boise State, and then they go to Louisville in week 3. This could be a real chance to make a statement for both teams, really. But UCF, if they can pull off a win over Boise and Louisville, I mean, you're probably looking at a top 20 ranking right there.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I mean, with Gus Malzahn down at UCF, I don't think he's going to have, to look over his shoulder and be on the hot seat year in and year out like he was at Auburn.
A little bit different.
I really think he can just go out and put his players in position and just coach. And I tell you what, if Louisville can win this game, this is a big win for Louisville. But I just look at UCF, and there's just been a big ball of consistency these last, 4 to 5 years where, they come in and they win these games. So before it was just kind of like, okay, this is a game that Louisville should win. But, with the flip side of that, I think this is a game that UCF should win. And Louisville is the underdog in my eyes in this game. But if Malik Cunningham and the crew come out and play really good ball and come out with a win, this is a good win for that program out there in Louisville.
All right, so that's the Friday night game. The Saturday games, Georgia Tech at Clemson, Michigan State at Miami, Virginia at North Carolina, and Virginia Tech at West Virginia. Old Big East rivalry right there. I like that game. Virginia Tech at West Virginia. Virginia, North Carolina, you got two teams. One team was in the ACC championship game a couple years ago. Another team on the rise. But let's focus in on Georgia Tech and Clemson and Michigan State at Miami. The Spartans, we talked about this on the Big Ten episode, definitely a team to watch out for. They got a tough opener to the season, tough 4-game stretch. De'Aaron King should be playing in this game. Should take care of business here if you're Miami. Rob, how do you feel about the Canes heading into 2021, assuming Derek King is going to be close to, I don't think he'll be 100% this year, but let's say he's at 85% for most of the season. And then my second question for you is, how do you feel about the development of Georgia Tech's roster? And are we going into Clemson for a total beatdown, or are the Jackets going to show us something, the young guys?
I think, Georgia Tech is going to come in with another beatdown again. We saw what Clemson did to them last season. That was just, murderer's row for that Georgia Tech team. But just going back to your, question in regards to De'Aaron King, I don't think he's going to be 100% healthy. And if he is 100% healthy, I mean, he probably had the Adrian Peterson, trainer and everything to come back from that torn ACL, because if I'm not mistaken, I think he tore it in the bowl game. So that progress is definitely, really, really quick. And he's had, injuries before in the past. So I don't think he's going to be 100%, but I think 85% De'Aaron King can definitely get the job done against the Michigan State team. That's kind of coming into their own, that's transitioned from, a new coach in Mel Tucker who had his first year last year. So I give the edge to Miami in that one.
So no love for Jamar Gibbs on Georgia Tech and Sims. No love for that development.
I tell you what, those are
they going to keep
studs.
it interesting?
Those are two studs right there. But once again, we talked about this Clemson defense bringing back majority of their people earlier in the pod. And I just think, this is probably going to be the year that Dabo Swinney actually relies on his defense more so than the offense. especially with all the pieces that you lost on that offense side of the ball. So I really think this Clemson defense is going to get after it this year, and is going to have a lot of teams in the ACC worried because of how they're going to play on the defense side of the ball.
Is Clemson a surefire playoff team this year, Rob?
No doubt about it in my mind. I think they're surefire.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the following week here. Friday, September 24th, Liberty goes up to Syracuse. Really only noting that game because they took care of business up at the Dome last year. And Malik Willis, potential Heisman candidate. I believe Liberty's also playing at Ole Miss, by the way. Hugh Freeze goes back to Ole Miss this year. So Liberty's going to be a team that's bounced around a little bit. Syracuse, they need to bounce back. So, like, hopefully they could take care of Liberty at home, but I'm not betting on it after what we saw last year there. September 25th on that Saturday, Missouri goes to Boston College, Louisville goes to Florida State, North Carolina at Georgia Tech, and Clemson at NC State. Just an opportunity for NC State to make a statement. Like, no one's expecting to win there. Georgia Tech, you might be overwhelmed by Clemson. I think they should, if they're developing at the level. We talked about the middle of this conference, Rob. If they're developing at the pace that, in my opinion, they should under Jeff Collins, I think that Georgia Tech needs to have one big upset this year. Florida State opening win last year looked good for Georgia Tech, but then we saw Florida State the rest of the season, so we're like, relax. Georgia Tech didn't really follow it up with much either. But if you could really push North Carolina to the brink. I don't want to see them getting blown out in these games anymore, because I believe what they're building there, and I think this is an opportunity for them to show some. Louisville, we talked about them a little bit already, goes into Florida State, 2 middle league teams. Which one could separate? Boston College and Missouri, another opportunity for the ACC to make a statement against the SEC. Jeff Hafley in year 2 against Eli Drinkwitz in year 2. Hey, great opportunity for BC to make a statement.
Yeah, I think you're right. I really think Jeff Collins is definitely building on something down there. They're getting the recruits. We talked about Sims. We talked about Gibbs, some high quality talent players coming out of high school that probably could have went anywhere, in the SEC that they wanted, but they ended up in Georgia Tech and the ACC. So you're going to see those developmental players come along the way. But just like you said, they just have to put everything together. You have to, if you're going to have a big win, just like they had last year against Florida State, you're going to have to follow that up. Not saying that you're, going to win the ACC, but you have to be competitive. You don't want to be the doormat of the ACC. And I think, they're building something where they don't have to be the doormat of the ACC. So you will want to see them to come out and be competitive in these games against the North Carolinas, the Clemsons of the world. So I'm right there with you, Nick, in regards to just them being competitive. So if they can kind of stick their hats in there and be competitive and kind of, if it ends on a field goal or if it ends on like a turnover or something like that, they're right there in the game. Then I think as a Georgia Tech fan, you kind of appreciate that more so than, the previous years.
Now, here's we're going to go to Thursday night, September 30th, Rob. Virginia comes down to Miami to play the Hurricanes. And for whatever reason, Virginia's just given Miami hell over the last, several years. But Virginia has been a tough matchup for the Canes. But if you're the Canes and you want to see this team get over the hump, this is a must-win game. For those of you Miami fans who are furious at my suggestion of benching De'Aaron King for the Alabama game, to not even bother with that game, get some backups in, get them some experience, treat that as a preseason game, because you got Appalachian State, Michigan State, and Virginia all coming to Miami the following 3 weeks. That's a chance. There's no reason to put your entire season on the line against Alabama. None. Sorry. Normally I'm a super competitive guy. Every game you got to win. The Yankees are the best franchise in sports because they try to win every season, right? This is not the game to go up against. If you're not, don't even bother with Alabama. Try to win these 3 games, because these are the types of games, the Michigan State, Virginia, these are the type of games that Miami will lose a stupid game like this every now and then. But with De'Aaron King, you really should win this game.
No, you're right about that, Nick. Those 3 games after the Alabama game are all, all Miami should come in being the favorite in all 3 games.
3-1.
Yeah. So
that should be the goal.
3-1 is not a bad start to a season, but I tell you what, 0-3 is a probably bad start, especially if you roll out De'Aaron King in the Alabama game and he kind of gets nicked up, or one of your other big playmakers kind of goes down in that Alabama game. I'm not trying to say throw in the towel in regards to the Alabama game, because on any given day, any team can be beaten. But once again, you just want to look at, the rest of your season. You kind of want to compete in the ACC. Losing one game to Alabama is not the end of the world. Actually, probably losing one game to Alabama will probably bolster you up in the standings, if anything.
Right.
So I definitely feel what you're saying in regards to kind of, not throwing De'Aaron King out there week 1 to the Wolves, to kind of give him that extra week to kind of heal up and rest and kind of prepare for the ACC schedule.
Plus, De'Aaron King, this is last year. So whoever you throw out as your backup quarterback against Bama, that's going to be great experience for them. And if King has an injury on that knee, re-injures the knee, it's going to be great to have that guy that you can say, like, okay, you got that experience against Bama, we need you now. Like, I don't think that's a foolish suggestion. I think you give De'Aaron King that extra week to rest. I know it's probably going to kill the guy on the inside, but on the other hand, he's like, I came back to play in that game. Try and sit me. Like, he probably won't let it happen, but I'm just throwing that out there. All right, let's go. So that Thursday night game, very, very big for Miami, that against Virginia. Saturday, October 2nd, you got Boston College going down. We're getting some of these weird games, Rob, where you're going to see repeat matchups from last year in the same locations. You don't see that too often, but because of COVID and all the weird scheduling, some teams are going to return back. Boston College returns to the scene of the crime in Clemson, where they had the Tigers sweating at halftime last year.
Yeah, they really did. I don't think they're gonna have Clemson sweating this season. I think Clemson is gonna be, up and go for that one. I don't think they're gonna be, walking in the dark with that particular game. I think they come out and they jump on BC early. But once again, Boston College is just one of those programs that you kind of see competitive, year in and year out. They maybe have that one game where they shock you and they win a game that they weren't supposed to. But it's there. They're trending in the right direction. They just have to get a little bit more, recruits on the recruiting end. But I just don't see them, upsetting the apple cart in this one against Clemson. I see this one being a beatdown, if you ask me.
I know the roster needs a little more help, but you got Phil Yurkovich coming back, the Notre Dame transfer, who certainly had some nice moments last year. What do you think about? He's got NFL potential, Rob. What do you think about that?
He really does, and not only him. It's a couple guys on that BC roster that has some NFL potential. But once again, when you go up against the Clemsons and the Alabamas of the world, and all these the Ohio States, all these top tier, you're going to need more than a couple, NFL.
That's cute. You got 4 NFL prospects on your roster.
So I'm telling you, because those guys have a bunch of NFL prospects, and we've seen that, especially the teams in the SEC, the LSUs, the Floridas, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, and the Ohio States of the world. So I don't expect Clemson to be sleeping on Boston College coming into this one this year.
I'm gonna make I'm not gonna stand by the prediction yet, but I'm gonna make a reckless prediction right now and say Phil Yurkovich can definitely work his way up into the first round as an NFL draft pick this year. If he has a good season, if he follows through, I think he's got all the tools to do it. I haven't watched a ton of his tape, Rob. I don't know a ton about the guy. I've seen him play a few times, but just with his size and like what I've seen from his arm, just watching him, I think he'd be a guy that we're talking about a lot next April. I think he could be in that conversation, more likely in the second or third round, but if he has a good season, it wouldn't shock me to see him jump up into the first round. But Pitt goes to Georgia Tech on October 2nd, and Louisville at Wake Forest. Little claw fence action there with the Demon Deeks. Hey, again, it's not that these games are the sexiest games on the planet, but if you're Narduzzi going up against Collins, we saw the handshake wasn't all that friendly last year. And then you got Wake Forest and Louisville. They've had it. I think the last time they played down in Wake, the score was a combined 120 points or something like that. Absolutely insane offensive game. So there's that middle tier of the ACC is super interesting. Who's going to end up where? These are the type of games that are going to sort that out, Rob. Saturday, October 9th, Florida State goes to North Carolina. Notre Dame goes to Virginia Tech. Two teams right there, Florida State, Virginia Tech. If you want to make a statement to America that things are heading in the right direction, this is a good day to do it for both of those.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely if you're Florida State, we know all the
beat
turmoil.
North Carolina last year, by the way.
Yeah, but we know all the turmoil that Florida State's went since Jimbo Fisher left, and the national championship with Jameis Winston and those guys. But with that being said, if you want this program to get back on track, these are the wins that you need to kind of rack up and have. And the same thing for Louisville. Those are the two teams outside of North Carolina and Clemson that has a little consistency year in and year out. That's right there in the cups of everything. But these are the games you have to win. And I tell you what, if Florida State can win this one, I can see them, being in line to land those 5-star, 4-star recruits, in the next couple of seasons coming out of high school.
I think you're going to see Florida State pull off a couple unexpected wins. Like when you're looking at it from the 2021, when you're looking ahead at 2021, like we don't know a lot about this team. The offensive line needed a lot of work still. I actually got to dive in more to the roster. That's why I'm not making any bold predictions just yet. But I think the Mackenzie Milton thing is huge. I think it's huge. Virginia Tech, same thing. You got a lot of questions to answer still. But Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame could be vulnerable. So that could be a statement win for the Hokies. The Hokies play the following Friday night at Boston College. Always a fun matchup with those former two Big East rivals when they get together. Saturday, November 6th, NC State goes down to Tallahassee. That's a game. If you're talking about 8-4, 9-3 type of season, you better win. Florida State. NC State coming in. That's a take care of business game. Hasn't always been that way with Florida State when it comes to NC State. Clemson goes to Louisville. If Louisville can take care of a couple of those early games that we're talking about, Rob, and become an interesting team, Malik Cunningham, if he becomes a dark horse quarterback that can make some noise, hey, maybe that's a game where Clemson gets a little nervous. Doubt it. But just Clemson going to Louisville, we've seen them struggle in that matchup before. And Georgia Tech goes down to Miami. Again, just statement game after statement game here we're looking at. And it's tough to project right now with the ACC because with Miami, you have an older roster to some extent, and you're expecting them to now's their time to make a run with this roster. But Georgia Tech, I just want to see that. I want Georgia Tech to go in and give I want that should become a feared program, like on a scale of not that they're going to overwhelm you with talent yet, but damn, they were tough to play. And that's why I think Georgia Tech, that is what's going to be a successful season for the Yellow Jackets. In my definition, is that, hey, I'm okay with 7-5, but I don't want 7-5 and every good team you play beat you by 20. I don't want to see that type of 7-5. I want to see a 7-5 where Miami's like, oh, damn, because I'm looking at Georgia Tech next year as one of those teams that could take a step and maybe talk about competing for their, competing and maybe talking about like a sneaky New Year's Six team in a year or two. Because some of these young guys they got, they're gonna keep growing. They're gonna get better. And if Jeff Sims continues to develop, Jackets could be something.
They really could. And I tell you what, just because of the recruiting landscape, how, the Georgia is right there. So they can kind of get, the kids in their own backyard to kind of stay home. And instead of going to Georgia, you can come to Georgia Tech. So if Georgia didn't recruit you, don't worry. You can kind of come to Georgia Tech and you kind of compete. You won't be in the SEC, but you're in the, the next best thing, probably the ACC outside of the Big Ten. But you got Clemson in your conference, so you will be able to compete against the Clemsons, the Virginia Techs, the Florida States, and the Miamis of the world. So that's not a bad slate to go up against. So if Georgia Tech, just like you said, Nick, can kind of get out these wins, highlight these big wins or kind of be competitive, then, it puts the eyes on the program from a national program and from a local standpoint from all those kids that's in that Georgia area where they can say, hey, well, Georgia didn't recruit me. So you know what? I'm going to stay home, but I'm going to just go to Georgia Tech. So I think you can kind of see that shape up moving forward if Georgia Tech can be competitive in these matchup, from on a consistent basis. But
why can't Georgia Tech be a top 3 ACC program in the next 2 years? We're at the point where that's not a stupid question.
I don't think it's a stupid question, especially when you get the likes of Jahmyr Gibbs and Sims. So you're doing it. You're doing it, but you just have to have a little bit more consistency, and you have to just rattle off those wins where, those kids in the state of Georgia want to come to Georgia Tech. So I think, if they can rack up the wins or they can be competitive against the tough teams, then I think, it helps them in the long run.
All right, Rob, let's go Thursday, November 11th. North Carolina goes up to Pittsburgh. Maybe it's a little cold for Sam Howell, but another opportunity to watch Sam Howell on some Thursday night football. Hey, and I also wanted to note that game too, because I feel like college football has just ceded Thursday night to the NFL. And I'd love to see a game like this that could be a potential, maybe Pitt's about 500 at this point in the season, but maybe North Carolina only has 1 or 2 losses, and this could be one of those sneaky upset type games. I want to see more games like this on Thursday night football going forward. Saturday, November 13th, Miami goes to Tallahassee, Florida State. This rivalry has been trash of late. I mean, last year, I was sad watching that game last year. Because I remember all the great Miami, Florida State games and all the hype. That rivalry needs some punch back to it, and I think Mackenzie Milton might be able to give it to him.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. This matchup has not been the best, over the last couple of seasons. But I can definitely see it getting back to that, especially if Florida State can kind of, get on one accord with Mike Norvell at the helm and kind of, just get on one page. It just seems like, ever since Jimbo Fisher left, this team has kind of been, up and down, on the coaching side and
mostly down
on the player side. So, yeah. So I think this is definitely a big game that everyone keys in on year in and year out, even if, the competition level hasn't been there like it has in the past. It's still an exciting game, no matter, what, the record is for both of these teams. But I tell you what, it definitely should be some more punch and energy into this matchup this year.
That's going to be a statement game for Mike Norvell, no matter how the season's going. If they struggle through the season, McKenzie gets hurt again, and it's a disappointment. If Florida State gets blown out in that game, we saw Willie Taggart get handed the pink slip after 2 years. Mike Norvell's not going to get fired because I don't think they got the money. They didn't have the money to fire Willie, and they somehow figured out how to do that. But I don't see them making another coach go after 2 years. So I think Norvell's safe. But if he gets smashed in this game the way it looked last year, where it was just a humiliation type of loss, I mean, if you're losing in a humiliating fashion, that could be real trouble for Florida State. So it's big game either way for Florida State, whether the season's going well or not. Boston College goes to Georgia Tech on that same day, and Notre Dame goes to Virginia. Sneaky tough Virginia team. Let's see how they continue to develop. They lost some playmakers. They didn't make any noise last year, Rob. I'm trying to think of the Virginia games I watched in 2020, and it's really like I couldn't tell you much about that Virginia team last year. I think I watched them play Miami. I think that's about it. But Georgia Tech hosting BC, another game, 2 middling programs, Jeff Collins, Jeff Hafley, Jeff with a G, Jeff with a J. Those guys going at it. They're trying to get a big win for their program to establish, like, hey, we're in the upper half of the league, not the lower half. And I think that's a type of game that does that too, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about that. And, it just seems like Virginia had, everything cooking a couple seasons ago. Just like you said, they made it to the ACC championship game, and they actually was in a New Year's Six bowl game. But it just seems like, maybe Virginia is one of those programs where, they do it every 4 years or every 5 years compared to, them doing it consistently. So we don't expect.
And that's good enough for Virginia, by the way.
Because we don't expect Virginia to be consistent year in, year out. We expect the Miamis of the world. We expect the Florida States, the Clemsons of the world. And North Carolina is kind of fitting in that mode right now. But outside the ACC, those are the top tier teams. We don't expect all those other teams to be be competitive year in and year out and actually make it to a New Year's Six bowl or win the conference, championship. But, if you do it every 4 years, that's a win for a program like Virginia. That's a win for a program like Louisville or Pittsburgh. And that's all we asking, to be competitive and try to win and roll off those big wins every 3 to 4 years. And I think as a fan base, you have to be happy with that.
Yeah, lower expectations for Virginia after losing a few of those, several of those players from that ACC championship run a few years ago. Florida State goes to Boston College on Saturday, November 20th. Cold weather game for the Noles, opportunity for the Eagles. Virginia Tech comes to Miami. Wake Forest at Clemson. Not terribly excited about it, but just a little bit of offense in Wake Forest potentially. Like maybe they can, if Clemson's snapping, they can give them a little bit of a scare in a half of football or something. Georgia Tech goes to Notre Dame. So another opportunity for the Jackets. Jackets are going to have plenty of opportunities to make a statement this year. If I'm picking one team that I was fascinated by them last year too. So I can't even say I'm not, but if I'm picking one team that I'm really going to be extra fascinated with, it's Georgia Tech this year. But Florida State is certainly in that equation as well. Rob, of all those games, I think on this particular day, I think Virginia Tech and Miami stand out the most, though. How do you feel about the Hokies heading into 2021?
I mean, once again, we know Virginia Tech and that program is, they had their ups and they have their downs. But for the most part, they can be competitive year in and year out. They could be competitive, and that's what you want to see Virginia Tech get back to. Just playing that beamer ball on the special teams, having that stout defense. But once again, we know this as Florida Gators fans. When you don't have that quarterback to kind of control everything and be the regulator for the offense and just for the team in general, it hurts. Not only does it hurt the offense, it hurts the defense and it hurts the program. So I think Virginia Tech is still in search of that, QB1 that kind of can keep them in every game. So until they find that guy, I think you're going to see those struggles with Virginia Tech. But this is a game that Miami should win. Once again, it's a rivalry game, Miami and Virginia Tech. It should be a good game. It always, shapes up to be a good game. But Virginia Tech, I don't expect much out of Virginia Tech until they get that, true QB1 that can kind of lead them and go out and win games.
Yeah, I feel like they've kind of fallen by the wayside where they get overlooked a little bit. Like it's unfortunate because that's a great. If you've never been to a game in Blacksburg too, that's a place to definitely check out. That's a hell of an environment too. Saturday, November 27th, I believe. Saturday, November 27th. Getting the rivalry games back. We missed them in 2020, Rob. Florida State goes to Florida. Georgia goes to Georgia Tech. Kentucky at Louisville. Clemson at South Carolina. And intra-ACC one here. Virginia Tech goes to Virginia for the Commonwealth Cup. Rob, I don't think Virginia Tech and Virginia are going to be playing for a ton. Shane Beamer, let's see how you do in year one against Clemson. Clemson's absolutely made the South Carolina job very difficult. So good opportunity for Beamer to maybe make a little noise there. Not optimistic. Kentucky, Stoops has done a great job with that job at Kentucky. And you'd argue it's the better job right now between him and Louisville right now, because Louisville fans, they want to talk about being in the hunt for the ACC at times. Kentucky doesn't have those expectations. Georgia and Georgia Tech got to get that win eventually if you're Collins. Nobody's expecting it this year or really anytime soon just yet. Still giving Georgia Tech some time to develop. And Florida State has not been a good rivalry over the last decade. One program's up, the other program's down, and it's been very one-sided. Gators won 41-14 in Mullen's first season. I'm blanking on the score the last time they played exactly, but it wasn't pretty. I'll say that. So the second year wasn't pretty either. Last year wouldn't have been pretty either. So Florida's definitely feels like they're about 10 miles ahead of Florida State. Rob, which one of those games jumps out to you?
I think all of them jumps out because we
It's
didn't
good to have him back.
yeah, it's just great to have these games back. We just
Yeah.
didn't get to see these games last year with with COVID and the shortened season and everything. So I just think as a fan, I'm just happy to see all these rivalry games back. But just going back to what you said about Georgia Tech earlier in the pod, Nick, Georgia Tech has a lot of opportunities to face some top tier teams where they can come out with a win or they can kind of be competitive and take these teams to the brink to kind of, shed some national spotlight on that Georgia Tech program. And this is another game, Georgia Tech and Georgia, this could be a game where, you fight over the in-state rivals. You're going to have a lot of kids at these games and they're going to be looking to go to Georgia or Georgia Tech. So if Georgia can't recruit everybody, Nick, Georgia can't get all the.
And as simple as that sounds, you're totally right. I mean, at some point, there's a wealth of talent in that state, and there's no reason you should be that bad if you're Georgia Tech. There's no, and they've made a tough transition, and I hope to God that Jeff Collins is not looked at by people as a coach that just hasn't won a lot in his first couple of years. Dude, the project he undertook in Atlanta was huge. And I like Paul Johnson. I think that style of football, there's something to say about the triple option. Georgia Tech was probably the most annoying team in the country to play at all times. And they won. Did they win 2 ACC titles with Johnson, or well, they won at least one when Calvin Johnson was there? I'm certain, but like I think they played in multiple ACC title games. I know that. So they were always a tough out week in and week out with Johnson, but I could see where that style of play after a decade plus is very difficult to watch every single week. And none of the ACC teams liked playing that anyway. Like, as my friends who are ACC fans, they'd be like, oh, we got to play Georgia Tech this week. Like, and you know what? That's understandable, but there's no reason why Georgia Tech can't flip the script on that at some point in the rivalry. There's certainly a team I'm watching this year, but I think with that schedule as difficult as it is, Rob, are they going to do any better than 7-5? I'm not optimistic they're going to be much better than like 500.
No,
season. They still got some development, but if like you said, the 5 losses, you want to see them be competitive in those losses. So they're a team I'm watching. But based on what we saw, we just went through all the big games that we highlighted in the ACC schedule. Whose schedule do you really like, and whose do you absolutely hate?
I hate Louisville's schedule. I just think
it's tough. You got Ole Miss and UCF in the first 2, even the non-conference isn't friendly.
Non-conference, and that's the thing. And I'm glad we have these non-conference games where you can get a Louisville and a UCF game, or you can get a Louisville and all these other teams non-conference. So I like these non-conference games, but when you just roll down the schedule and it sees how it shapes up for Louisville, it's a very, very
even a game
schedule.
like Florida State that could be a winnable game. I think they're going on the road for that. I mean, it's like nothing's really friendly on that Louisville schedule. They got Clemson coming to town. Like it's, I mean, you could easily Satterfield could easily be out this year. That's a great pick right there. I like Miami's schedule. I don't have much confidence in them following through. And I say that I think they could. If you want to get excited about a team in the ACC that's not Clemson, it should be Miami. But I have some serious reservations about putting a ton of stock into Derek King returning 9 months after injury to play at full form. It's an unfair expectation. And I'm not doubting I think Derek King is a hell of a quarterback. I mean, it was heartbreaking that he had suffered that injury. I mean, outside of Clemson, he might be one of the best, DJ Uyunglele, like he might be the best quarterback in the ACC college football level. Maybe not a quarterback prospect, but Sam Howell, Phil Yurkovich, there's certainly other quarterbacks in that conversation, but like, Derek King's definitely in it, but I think if Derek King comes out and they get off to a hot start, and by hot start I mean 3-1 on the season, then Miami's going to be a little intriguing to watch on that. So who's your intriguing team? And if it's not North Carolina, why?
It is North Carolina for me,
Okay.
Nick, and the reason why is
That was
Sam
going to be my
Howell.
second pick.
And I just want to see how Sam Howell plays, without all the weapons that he had last year. You've seen Sam Howell like light up the stat sheet. You've seen Sam Howell, rely on his weapons, but a lot of those guys are not going to be there. So I just want to see how he develops along, with the season, knowing that he's probably going to be a front Heisman candidate, not only a front Heisman candidate, but a top tier draft pick at the quarterback position. I just want to follow Sam Howell along this season and see how he plays and see, how Mac Brown kind of builds off his momentum of the last 2 years. He had a tremendous freshman year. He followed up with a great sophomore year, and then coming into his junior year, I just want to see him take that next leap, and he can. I just want to see him, if he's going to press a little bit more with those weapons not there, or is he going to just let the game come to him? So North Carolina is probably the team outside of, Miami and Clemson that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on in the ACC.
Who's your sleeper team?
As much as we just talked about the schedule and how it shapes up for them, I think Louisville, because once again, Malik Cunningham, Malik Cunningham, he's that quarterback that can go out and win games by himself. So, if he goes out and, say those tough games that's on that Louisville schedule, say if they can kind of roll a couple squeaky wins out and Malik Cunningham is putting up big numbers and the momentum is, going on the Louisville, sideline and everyone's just hopping on that bandwagon, I can kind of see, Malik Cunningham being a dark horse Heisman Trophy candidate. So as much as I don't like their schedule gives them a lot of leeway to actually, move up in the rankings and actually propel Malik Cunningham to that Heisman Trophy if he plays well.
I'm not going to call Florida State a sleeper team because they're Florida State. I have too much respect to call them a sleeper team. But if they get off to, especially too, because they're opening with Notre Dame, and if McKenzie Milton throws for like 4 touchdowns and 300 yards, it's going to be the return story of the year, and he's going to be all over game day the following week, and people are going to flip out if that happens. And there's a chance it could. So Florida State will not have a low profile. They have a chance to get off to a really hot start. Now, if they come out lay an egg against Notre Dame, people forget about them again. But they have a chance to really flip the script and turn over last season right away out the gate. I would love that if I'm a Florida State fan. I love the opportunity there. So I can't call them a sleeper team because I think they'll be on the radar no matter what from the jump. So my sleeper team is going to be Boston College, because I liked what I saw from Hafley's team last year. He knows how to coach a defense, but he's got the quarterback. They always have good running backs up at BC. They got a couple of linemen coming back this year. Like I like what Boston College is building, and they might not be that, they might not be serious contenders to win the league, but we're talking about those teams that could either be 4-8 or 8-4 or 9-3 type of teams. Like, that's Boston College is the definition of that, and I think that they have a chance to be the higher end of that. So we'll see how the Eagles end up doing it this year, but I like what Hafley's got going up there at BC. Rob, you got anything else to say about the ACC before we head out?
I tell you what, don't be surprised if ACC player wins the Heisman Trophy this year.
You got a couple good candidates.
You got some candidates.
Give me your top 5.
Top 5 candidates for the Heisman Trophy out of the ACC. Definitely number 1 for me is Sam Howell.
Yeah.
Number 2 is DJ. I think, if Justin Ross can come back to be 100%,
we throwing a receiver.
We know the type of, impact that he had as a true freshman. And we saw that on the national stage. So if he can kind of come back to that and take the pressure off of DJ being a full-time starter, I think he definitely gets consideration. And De'Aaron King, he's another one that's in there for me. If he can kind of remain healthy throughout the season and, rattle off those big wins, I think he's right there in the thick of things with the Heisman Trophy. And in a dark horse for me, I have to say Malik Cunningham. I know that schedule is brutal.
Love your Cunningham.
I can see him having, if he can have a Lamar Jackson type of season and they can kind of, rattle some big time wins together, he's right there in the thick of things of the Heisman Trophy race.
he just makes so many. Like I've watched a little bit of Cunningham on film, and I think he makes some terrible throws sometimes. That's my issue with Cunningham. But I'm going to throw in one more name on that list. And I've said it. It's probably about the 17th time I've said his name on this podcast. But Florida State might not be a great team this year, but they might get some offense going. And it's going to be thanks to Milton. And don't think he's not going to be a huge media darling this year. You're going to be tired of hearing the name Mackenzie Milton. UCF transfer. You're going to see the play where he broke his leg about 150 times over the course of the season, folks. So get ready to see that. I think he's going to be a huge story in the college football scene. And I hope he is because, I mean, it'd be great to see him come back. His career was cut short at UCF, and he's been off the field for a couple of years now. And, he was boys with Dylan Gabriel down at UCF and didn't want to upset the chemistry in the locker room, and he might not even be able to beat out Gabriel anyway. Gabriel's fantastic, but Milton can. They haven't had a real quarterback at Florida State. When was the last time they had a real quarterback at Florida State, Rob? Jameis. I mean, seriously, like it's been pretty bleak. Francois wasn't great. He was a tough kid. Francois was tough. He could take a hit. There's some games where it's like, that offensive line's been brutal. But that's why it was a curious choice when Milton decided to go to Florida State. I'm like, is that man watch any of their offensive line highlights over the last few years? Yeah. But they got some transfers in on the offensive line. I don't think it could be any worse. And I think they will be better with better quarterback play, if that makes sense too. So I think they'll get the ball out quick. He's a smart guy. Yeah, I think FSU is going to be a completely different look. And if he starts out early by torching Notre Dame, that man's going to be on the Heisman list the entire season. So we'll see. That Sunday night game against Notre Dame is going to be a big tell. So, hey, that's been a look at the ACC from American Football Stories, ACC football schedule in 2021. Those are our highlights in May. We could be wrong. It's May. But, hey, it's fun to start dreaming about the season, Rob. Like you said, full stadiums, man. We could get some full stadiums back. We'll definitely try to hit some ACC games this year. And looking forward to the next episode. We're going to dive into the SEC schedule next time on American Football Stories. We're going to send you out with a word from our sponsor, Coach Paint. American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
Thank you for listening to American Football Stories podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, American Football Stories. We are working to grow our network on YouTube and we'd love to have you subscribe. You can find us also on Apple Podcasts, on Twitter, at American FB Story, and on our website, AmericanFootballStories.com. I am Robert Parker. My co-host is Nick Knudsen. This has been another episode of American Football Stories.